Some of what you're about to hear may be disturbing to some listeners, so listener discretion is advised. Hey everybody, it's Dan Szematowicz.
And it is Andrew Iden.
And it's been a while since the two of us have come at you together, and we just wanted to spend a few minutes and tell you about some of the stories that we're working on that you can expect to hear on Deviant in the coming weeks and months. Talk a little bit about that and play some sound from some of what we're working on too. And Andrew, I'm pretty excited about some of the stuff we have coming for everyone.
Yeah, I think that the Tuesday show is where we like to kind of stretch our legs and tell these stories in a little bit of a longer format. You know, we've always kind of got the wheel spinning on what stories to jump into, and Lord knows there's no shortage of them.
Yeah.
You know, I think I've actually had a couple people ask me, like, what's the criteria we use for picking a story? And I think oftentimes it's sort of just, is this interesting to you, me, our crew? And if so, I think if the answer is yes, then that's kind of the only criteria.
Yeah, and we get a lot of suggestions from other folks too, and we love getting those. And if you want to give us suggestions for stories that we should be looking at, please do. You can do that in a couple places. Check out our Patreon at deviantpodcast.com, or you can hit us up on social, Instagram at deviant.podcast. Same address for TikTok too, if you're on TikTok at deviant.podcast. Also, you can find us on YouTube. And we hope you've been enjoying our latest spate of Tuesday stories, the West Mesa Bone Collector, our exploration of serial killer Joseph Miller.
Obviously, we look at a lot of stories that kind of fit under the Deviant umbrella, whether it's true crime or sort of stuff that lives a little bit sort of outside of that, what we all kind of think.
Mm-hmm.
But you and I have interests under the sort of true crime Deviant umbrella that kind of have their own subgenre.
We're not just serial killer of the week, right?
Yeah. Right, exactly. And, I think we oftentimes talk about making sure that there's some value in the stories that we're telling.
Yeah.
With that in mind, what's the one that you're working on?
Yeah, here's a little bit of what you can look forward to coming up. So next week, we're airing part 1 of our exploration of violence and murder that is associated with what's known as the incel movement. It started off with me looking at this attack that happened in 2018 by a guy named Alec Minassian. And one day he rented a van, drove to the financial district of Toronto in Canada, and just started driving down the sidewalk trying to hit people. 10 died. Unlike most of these guys, he was captured alive. And when he was interrogated, he claimed that he was inspired to do this by something called the incel movement. And if you don't know what incels are, it's sort of this online community that's sprouted up over the last decade or so of men who are unable to find romantic partners, mainly with women. It's the source of a lot of anger for them. And like most groups, most do not turn violent, but a few do. And there have been attacks. And as we started looking at Minassian, he's one of the few who has survived an attack and lived to tell about it. And we have some interrogation tape from him, and let's listen to a little bit of it right now.
So I booked the van,
Yep.
and then I just simply wait until today,
Yep.
and then I go rent the van, and then I drive it, take it downtown to Toronto,
Okay.
and I just start using it as a weapon.
Okay. All right. And so when you say that, what do you mean by that?
Meaning the vehicle collided with several pedestrians, some of who are no longer alive as a result.
Right. Okay.
And he goes on at length about sort of his rationalization for doing all this, and it opens up a really large world of this really warped philosophy and viewpoints where these incels, these involuntary celibates, is what it's short for, want to start a world revolution. And it's full of bizarre terminology where they target women who they call Stacies. They're the women who won't sleep with them. And they also target the men that they call Chads. And Chads are the men that Stacies will sleep with. It's very bizarre. Here's a little bit of Minassian talking about that.
Who would the targets for this uprising be?
All of the alpha males.
All the alpha males, so the Chads.
Yes.
So those are the people that you want to kill?
Yes.
And who else?
Any of the Stacys who do not wish to give their love and affection to the incels.
So they're a target as well?
Yes.
To be killed?
Yes.
Okay, and what about the normies? Normies.
Yes, we don't necessarily wish to kill the normies, but we do wish to subjugate them in order to make them understand that our type is the more superior one.
Right. So when you say subjugate, what do you mean by that?
Meaning either imprison them or put them in a lower position in society.
Okay.
So that they acknowledge the incels or the Pepe the Frog types as the more superior ones.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, and a lot of that does not make sense when you hear it on first blush, but you can kind of get the vibe of it that it's this very bizarre culture, and it exists on and because of social media in many ways.
And the internet.
Yeah, the internet.
No, it's an interesting story, and we were both kind of looking at it and realized in some of our conversations, like a lot of things, it's never about just that incident.
Right.
Like so many of these things, it's like, wait. If you're going to tell the story the right way, and if you're going to lay out what happened, you got to kind of zoom out and give the whole web of this thing. And that's kind of what happened here.
And not even indirectly, like as we were going through this, Manassian claims to have been in contact with prior incel attackers, starting with sort of their saint of this movement, Elliot Rodger, the perpetrator of the Isla Vista attacks in California in 2014. He says that they were talking on Reddit before those attacks. Assuming that's true, there's a nexus here. And we'll start this next week. You're going to be shocked at sort of how it reverberates to today in 2025. So that's the latest story I've been working on. All right, Andrew, you've been working on a fascinating one too.
I've been working on this story. It's going to be coming sometime in March, I think.
This is intense. Why don't you lay it out?
It's about some people might know this case. It got a lot of headlines, but it's one that I have worked on and researched and talked to some people connected to a lot, and that is the story of the Hart family, which is in 2018, a car went over a cliff in Westport, California. And it was 2 women and their 6 adopted children. They had adopted 2 sets of 3 children from Texas. They were married, gay women, white women who had adopted these children. And what's really fascinating about the story is obviously, the entire family passed away in this tragic crash. And when you start looking at this story, what's fascinating is this becomes a story of optics and what is seen versus what we think we see, what we think we know, versus what the reality of the circumstances are. These women were all over social media. They were very forward-facing. The optics of the family was a very kind of blended, interracial, love, peace, harmony, kind of all of those things. They had their own Facebook pages, and they used to go to festivals, and people at festivals knew who they were, and they were danced with flowers and did all these things. But like behind closed doors, these were children that were being neglected, that were not being fed. They were asking for help. They were begging for help. And it becomes a story of these 2 women made the decision to kill their entire family. And there were missed opportunities all along the way.
There often are.
And it's a fascinating story, and one that I've kind of been immersed in for a long time. And part of the production on this story is with a gentleman by the name of Tom Allman. It was the sheriff of Mendocino County, and that is where the car went over the cliff. And he was one of the first people on the scene and kind of led the investigation into what happened. And we had a great conversation, and here's a little bit of what he said.
These 2 moms, based on what we saw on the internet versus what we learned from neighbors, one employer, CPS investigators throughout the nation and so forth, they had many faces. They had the face of being very strong, white, lesbian moms who were raising these 6 Black children bravely in this new world. But when you look at the facts of learning that these were 2 moms that punished their children by withholding food or punished their children by having them sleep on the floor without a mattress or just out and out punish their children. That changes the dynamics of the first vision that I gave you. It certainly takes away the image of being two proud moms who want to show the diversity to the world. It showed me that there were two moms that were very manipulative and moms that, in my opinion, this ended with two moms who felt that their world was coming to an end because their acts were becoming known to everyone.
So you'll hear more from him. We're going to be talking to some people that knew this family, people that were kind of intimately connected to them in a number of different ways. It's a fascinating story that is beyond just how this family perished, but sort of all the dots along the way that were just completely not seen.
And I can't wait to hear that. And that's coming up again after our exploration of the incel murders. And a little farther down the line, we're looking at a story about a serial killer who may be one of the most prolific in United States history. He has...
Not named Israel Keys.
Not named Israel Keys. Way more prolific than Israel Keys or any of the other serial killers that we've profiled. And he's confessed to quite a few murders, 60 confirmed, almost 100 suspected. And he confessed to many of those on tape. And we're going to listen to one of those in just a second. And that serial killer that we were just talking about, his name is Samuel Little. And over the course of decades and over many states, he killed women. And again, very prolific, 60 confirmed, 93 claimed and suspected. And he had an incredible memory, incredible recall, not just for the details of his crimes, but for the faces of his victims. He drew many of them. And for some of the officers and law enforcement that he confessed to, they still have those drawings on their walls. And again, he confessed to many of these murders on tape, and we're going to listen to one of those right now. This is a confession of a crime. This is a confession of a murder. So just keep that in mind as we move into this tape.
She was pretty, a light-skinned, brown, honey-colored skin.
How old do you think she was?
She was about 30.
Okay, and she's a black female.
Yeah.
And tell me where you met her.
I met her in a nightclub in New Orleans. Her sister was dancing with this guy on the floor. And when I come in, the girl that I was with offered me to dance with me. And while we were dancing, she says, you want to go riding after this, after this party's over? We walked outside and she looked and seen my car, that Lincoln. She said, ooh, that's a beautiful car too. So she had arm in arm, walking to the car. We got in. We was on the Highway 10. I took off the exit, went, and that sure enough was the road leading into the woods. And we went in and parked. So we finally got to where we were going. It was by a river, a little, they had a machine out there in that little river.
Dredging?
Dredging.
Okay.
I grabbed her by the legs and pulled her to the water. Mm-hmm. That's the only one that I ever killed by drowning.
Describe the location where she's left.
Okay, I left her with her head still in the water, half her body underwater, and her thighs and legs on the bank.
Yeah, I mean, this is on video, but you could probably hear it in his voice how much he's enjoying talking about this.
When we did the Israel Keys story, we were immersed in that tape for a good while. Mm-hmm. And after a while, it's never less horrific, but you sort of become a little bit numb to sort of the conversation, right? And so It's been a while since I've been in tape like that. I mean, yeah, it's beyond comprehension.
You got unnumb.
Right. But again, there's value in kind of trying to learn how these kinds of people operate.
Yeah, with Samuel Little, it's not just that. It is that. It's also many of his victims are unidentified. They are confirmed, but not identified. So, like many serial killers out there, authorities are looking for help in identifying the victims. And this is still a very active case with both the FBI and various law enforcement agencies across the country, including Texas and the Texas Rangers. They have a big part in this as well. So that's something that we're looking at for down the road too. And there are plenty more taped confessions where that one came from. So look forward to those on Tuesdays. And we have some interesting Friday shows coming up, our off-script shows as well, including one I'm really excited about. I enjoyed the hell out of doing this one, Jack Barsky. Now, if you don't know who Jack is, Jack's not his real name. Well, it is his real name, but it's not his original name. Jack was actually born in East Germany, and he became a spy for the KGB. And he, just like that show The Americans, he was here illegally for 10 years in the United States spying for the KGB during the height of the Cold War in the 80s. And that is an incredible story, and I can't wait for you guys to hear it.
And yeah, I had a great conversation. I'm enjoying some of those freeform chats, and I had a conversation with Robin Kurnow, who was a longtime anchor at CNN. She now has a podcast called Searching for America, and it's kind of an exploration of the American psyche from her perspective as a South African who now lives in the United States and is raising children here. And we talked about crime, covering crime. She talked about being kind of in front and center for the Oscar Pistorius Blade Runner trial, if you remember that one, in South Africa. She got to know him fairly well, and so that was a trial she covered from start to finish. And she had a lot of great perspectives on covering crime cases and being a journalist in South Africa and then being a journalist in the United States and kind of the dynamics between the two and how they're different and similar. So that was a great conversation. And I mentioned earlier about kind of being into these stories that are dealing with extremism. And I had a great conversation with a guy by the name of Steve Gunderson, who was a ATF agent and had a number of, was involved in a lot of the high profile stuff that the ATF got involved in the 90s as it pertains to extremism. So that was a great conversation, and that's coming up soon too.
Yep. And coming up this week is sort of an introduction to where we're going with Manassian and Incels and Elliot Rogers and those guys. We're talking to Jeffrey Simon this Friday, who is an expert on lone wolf terrorism, and kind of like the attack that just happened in New Orleans this past January. Remember that? He's the expert on this, and it'll really set us up nicely to hear the story that's coming up this next Tuesday.
And you may be hearing a little bit less of me on Tuesdays, but that's not because I've necessarily gone anywhere. It's just because I'm allocating my resources into some of these longer series that we're rolling out. Take a lot more planning, a lot more digging, all of that kind of stuff. So Dan is holding down the fort on some of the Tuesday operations while I try to get ahead of him and keep that pipeline moving.
We are finding efficiencies in our core processes.
Yes.
Yes. So we're excited for you to hear all of what we just talked about. And again, that starts this Friday with Jeffrey Simon. And again, if you have suggestions for us, hit us up. DeviantPodcast.com is our Patreon. It's free to join. At Deviant.podcast on Instagram and TikTok.
2025, away we go.
Yep. Those are our plans for 2025 so far, and we'll keep you updated. So stay tuned, and we'll see you soon.